Hey everyone, Fear Crawler here. Welcome to the video. For today's video, I'm joined by my friend Hello Creeps. I'll link her channel in the video description below. She is a newer narrator, so I do hope you'll take a moment to check her channel out, watch a few of her videos, and maybe even subscribe. She will narrate the first story, while I narrate the second and third stories. I do hope you'll enjoy.
Two months ago, I have just found out that my son is an urban legend. I don't want to give out the full name of my son because I don't like the idea of checking him out on the internet, and also to protect you. My son is 7 years old, and I have always thought that he was just a normal kid, and that did normal kiddie things which all 7-year-olds do. Believe me though, that I bloody wished that he was just a normal 7-year-old kid, and you wouldn't know how much I wished for it, and people don't appreciate normal anymore. They always have high hopes that their child is different and is going to be famous someday. I have always been a big fan of urban legends and curses, and yes, they may not be true, but I still enjoyed them. From Bloody Mary, the slit woman, and the dead body under your mattress. I have read them all and heard them all, and with technology advances, I can listen to so much more in many variations of mediums. I could listen to them on my phone, computer, and TV. It was 2 months ago, after coming home from work and getting into bed, that I decided to listen to some scary urban legends and scary cursed stories. Now, I am going to change my son's name to Tommy Poke, and so the urban legend or curse will be called the Tommy Poke Curse. As I was searching through the internet for new urban legends, I came across a website I had never seen before. It was a new curse with my son's name, image, and details about his family, which was me and my wife on it. It had a depressing image of my son, and the website catered to the Tommy Poke curse only. The curse went like this, that the Tommy Poke curse was about a small boy who was sad and bored with his family. It said that the father was always working, in which it was true, as I was always working, and it also said that my wife was always tired, which was also true. Tommy Poke curse apparently said that my son, an urban legend, went round traumatizing other kids who were happy in their family. It said that my son broke up families and destroyed other kids' lives because he hated his own family life. I messaged a furious, angry message to the creator of this strange website, and also used words like pedophile and creep, and I wanted it down. The creator of the website messaged me back, saying that my son destroyed his family when he was young, and that I should be careful. The next day, I started observing my son, and I was blown away as I had just realized that my son hardly ever smiles, laughs, or is ever in joy. I could not remember the last time I took him to the cinema, or as a family did anything together. When I took my son to school, I could hear other kids whispering things about him, and other kids looked scared to be around him. I don't know how I didn't realize this before. On the website, it had images of all the kids and families my 7-year-old son had destroyed. There were rules to the Tommy Poke curse, like not saying out his name as a joke or in social context, and if you had a good day out with your family, or coming back from a good holiday with your family, you must cut your hand with a knife and say, "Tommy Poke, leave me and my family alone," 3 times. This was my son though. How could my son be an urban legend? It explained why no other kid ever wanted to play or come to Tommy's birthday parties or like talking to him. How is my son a curse, an urban legend, when me and my wife gave life to him? There were so many questions that I needed answers for, and I was mixed between anger and disbelief. There were videos about him and scary stories which I struggled to believe because he was just 7 years old. Then, the creator of the website detailing everything about the Tommy Poke curse contacted me and wrote, "I have given your email to people presently affected by the curse of your son. Please tell him to stop." Ever since then, I have been getting messages from kids who were all begging me to stop my son from destroying their families. The Tommy Poke curse ranged from mental struggle, physical struggles like diseases, and even painful deaths, all caused by my son. I saw the pictures as well. My son, though, always looked innocent, and when I checked up on him after receiving many emails from kids after being victims of the Tommy Poke curse, he was always in bed sleeping peacefully. Then, when I read another piece of information about the Tommy Poke curse on the website, it said the Tommy Poke curse likes to be in families who have lost their child and shapeshifts to look like the child they had lost. Then I realized that me and my wife did not give birth to an urban legend. We are victims of one.
I barely even know where to start with this. It's been happening so much I almost forget how it got started. But here's how it all started. I was 7 years old at the time. It was summertime. I was at the park down the street from my house, just screwing around like young children do. It was 7 p.m. and still mostly light out. There was a very deep forest behind the park. I will try to explain the town I live in better. There was the street I lived on, and 7 houses down was the park. Across the street from the houses was a somewhat thick line of trees, but it didn't go too deep. Then there was the park down the street. It was a nice little park, never too crowded, but usually not barren of people. Behind it, like I stated before, was a very thick woods. Me and my friends were playing at the park unsupervised, as we were very trustworthy for our age. And that's when one of my friends, Darren, has this bright idea. He says that we should go explore the woods until 8 o'clock. Darren had a watch, by the way. The other friend, Jake, calls Darren an idiot and refuses. But Darren was persuasive, even at that age. He convinces us to go explore the forest. We start walking. Roughly 30 minutes later, we reach a clearing. It was about 50 feet or so in diameter. There were rocks placed in a circle in the center of the clearing. We slowed our pace considerably. As we got closer, we noticed a horrible smell, straight out of a nightmare. It smelled like decaying meat mixed with more decaying meat. That's the best I can describe it. We didn't get too close. I swear that smell was so bad that it could have killed us. I looked over at Darren and he has this stupid smile all over his big face. He said that we should come back at midnight. I said there was no way my parents would let a 7-year-old out of the house at midnight, much less alone. That's when he starts smiling again. I knew what he was thinking. Sneak out. I sighed. Fine, I'll be there, I said. Little did I know, that was the worst decision of my life. It was 11:23. I was already on my way to meet up with Darren. It only took about 2 minutes to get to the park. Darren was there just on the edge of the forest. Jake was not there. Darren says, "Good, now let's go." So we start walking into the woods. Around a half hour later, We make it to the edge of the clearing. There was a sparse fog surrounding the clearing. We heard a sort of chanting coming from within the fog. It was very faint, almost inaudible, and even at that age I could tell that there was something wrong. There was something resonating within the fog. Then it appeared. A silhouette of a figure moving through the fog. It was vaguely humanoid, but smelled like nothing I've ever smelled before. It smelled like a literal ton of gorilla feces, mixed with rotting alligator flesh. Its stench was even worse and stronger, mind you, than the smell from earlier that day. It was lanky, but not terribly skinny. Suddenly, Darren took a step back and tripped over a branch, creating a crunchy, leafy sound. The thing immediately cocked its head in our direction. Those eyes. Oh, those eyes. They will forever haunt my soul. They were completely black. The creature's skin was dark crimson, almost the color of blood. Needless to say, we booked it all the way back home as the creature let out a screech that I will never unhear. It was shriller than the call of death, colder than the ice of the Arctic Circle, louder than your scream when you sit on a tack. That only encouraged us to run even faster. We reached the street within 15 minutes. Both of us vomited from exhaustion. We heard loud snapping of trees behind us. Not branches, not twigs, trees. We both ran for my house. I banged on the door with all my might. My sister Charlotte opened the door. She was 13 and looked absolutely furious. Mom and Dad were not home this night. Darren ran onwards to his house, while I ran straight past my sister and booked it up the stairs to my room. I shut the door tight and went back to bed. I could not fall asleep, though. Then, around 10 minutes later, I smelled it again. It was the smell. The smelly smell. I was horrified. I peeked out the window just enough so that I could see out and nothing could see me. The crimson silhouette was there, standing absolutely still. I flung myself back to bed so fast I'm unsure how I didn't get whiplash. The smell receded over the course of 5 minutes and I finally fell asleep. The next day I woke up. I walked out of my room in a daze. My family was in the living room, apparently expecting me. Charlotte had snitched. Needless to say, I was grounded for a month. No exaggeration. Though over the course of the next week, I found Charlotte, Mom, and Dad all mentioning a smell that returned for the next 2 weeks. This next experience occurred when I was 10 years of age. My birthday was just 3 days before this happened. Mom and Dad were in their mid-40s and Charlotte was 16. Darren, Jake, and I were still good friends. We didn't remember the strange creature which had haunted our dreams when we were 7, but by chance, the three of us were venturing through the woods in the late evening, while there was still a little light out. It was summer, mind you. That's when we happened to stumble upon the clearing with the fog beginning to gather. Darren's and my face respectively lose color when we see the fog gathering. Jake sees this and wants to know what's going on. We can barely choke out the words. We see the fog gathering faster and faster. We knew there was something very wrong about this place. The clearing was now engulfed in a swirling mess of fog. Somehow, the fog was only confined to the clearing. That's when we hear it. The shriek from all those years ago. I was paralyzed with fear for about 10 seconds. I see the shape of my childhood nightmare through the fog, and that's when I noticed Jake and Darren take off back to the street. I followed suit and booked it as fast as I could. When I'm about halfway to the street, close behind Jake and Darren, I hear the shriek again. It was so close. I took a small glance behind me and I screamed. That thing was right on our tail. We broke the trees with that thing trailing us. However, it was dark out. Darren was the one with the watch. We knew it would catch us if we stopped to open the door to a house, so we screamed and shouted as loud as we could while running down the street. Then I felt something was wrong. I already felt like that, but now it was worse. I looked back once more and it was on the edge of the trees, just watching as we went to our respective houses. My sister answered the door and looked around. She saw the thing receding back into the forest. I know because her expression went from absolutely furious to just seeing a ghost. Jake's parents were out of town for a week and he was hanging at my place for that time. We rushed inside and no one said a word until morning. Now, however, was when the real horror started. The night after the thing almost caught me and my friends, the creatures started turning up around the neighborhood, starting around 8 p.m. until 1 a.m., pacing up and down the tree line, just barely visible. Then, one night it did not do that. Instead, it walked over to Darren's house. It was midsummer and very humid, so he had his window cracked open just enough to let some of the hot air out. The thing just opened his window and crawled into his room. It reappeared just seconds later, dragging something behind it. No, not something. Someone. It was Darren. The creature's massive clawed hand covered his mouth so he couldn't scream. He was kicking and trying with all his might, but the creature ignored his flailing and dragged him into the woods. I went and got my dad. He was on his computer reading news articles. I told him to look out the window down the street. That's all I could muster because I was so terrified I was literally speechless. He looked and went pale. He raced up to his room, woke up my mom, and came back down with our rifle. He stepped outside and fired a round from it. The creature looked back. He fired another round and it struck the creature's face. I saw blood splatter from the side of its head onto the road. My sister came out of her room to see what was going on. Dad was on the porch shooting at a creature that shouldn't exist. Me and my mom were sitting on the couch silent. Jake was huddled in a corner, and Charlotte just stood there in the middle of the living room with absolutely no idea as to what was happening. I peered out the window in the living room. The creature flung Darren into the woods like a rag doll. He was knocked unconscious when he hit a tree. The thing took a flying leap into the woods after him, but now the whole side of the neighborhood was awake. Dad called the cops. They arrived 15 minutes later. He told them something snatched Darren and took him into the forest. That pungent, disgusting smell was receding, just like the hope of saving Darren. The cops did not find anything that night. Darren's parents were hysterical. I could not even muster the courage to cry. I had just witnessed what that thing was capable of. I looked over at Charlotte and she was sitting still like a statue on the couch. She had seen the creature backing into the woods a few nights ago, but now she had seen it throw Darren like a baseball into the woods and jump in after him. We had never believed something like that could exist until we saw it, smelled it, and heard it. Fast forward to the last encounter. I was 14 years old and Darren was never found. Charlotte was 20 years old, going to college but living with us until she could afford an apartment. Jake and I were in the basement playing some late-night video games on PlayStation 3. We had two other friends over. Their names were Bill and Bob. They were brothers. We were playing Battlefield 4 at midnight when we heard a faint knocking on the basement window. We looked up and didn't see a thing. Then, the dark shadow blocking the basement window moved away, and we could see outside for real this time. We didn't even know it was a shadow until it moved. That's when we noticed the smell from all those years ago. Bill and Bob have never had an encounter with that creature, so that's why they didn't understand mine and Jake's terrified faces. Then, from the living room upstairs, I heard the unlocked windows sliding open. The stench was overwhelming. We heard creaking on the floorboards. We all hid in the laundry room, which was connected to the basement. Then, we heard it creep down the stairs and enter the basement. Suddenly, almost too fast for me to see, it raced into the room and grabbed Jake in one arm and Bob in the other. It threw Bob at me like a rock. The wind was knocked out of me. Then it grabbed Bill as he tried to run past it. Bill wasn't exactly the brightest of people. It then bounded up the stairs faster than a hyena on crack. Me and Bob ran after it. We came upstairs, and that's when we saw Charlotte with the gun running after it. She fired 3 rounds at it, 2 of them hitting. The thing dropped the kicking form of Bob, turned around, ran at Charlotte, and sucker punched her in the face. She flew backwards at least 5 feet. It turned around and walked back to the woods, with Jake still trying in vain to free himself. That's when our neighbor Rick heard all the commotion and looked out his window. Needless to say, he ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife he had. He ran up to the slowly walking monstrosity and tried to stab it. It whipped around, just barely avoiding the slash of the knife. It dropped Jake and grabbed Rick by the throat, lifting him 2 feet off of the ground. That's when we hear the sound of police sirens. While all of this was going on, my mom had called the police. The horror turned around too late and was struck by the police car. It was flung 10 feet away. The cops got out and loaded the horror with so much lead you could make a door out of it. The creature, badly injured, limped back into the woods, all the while producing that horrible shriek. They were unable to find Darren or anything that once was Darren, as I stated before. We never saw it again, so I assumed it bled out. Jake, Bob, Bill, Charlotte, and I all survived that. The same cannot be said for Darren, however. I'm 27 writing this to you now, for those events are still fresh in my mind. I will never be able to forget, assuming I survived this night. I did some research online and found the description of that creature almost matches a flesh gate, so that's what I shall call it. You see, most of the reason I'm writing this to you is because the flesh gate has returned. I live in a new town, have a family and a good job, but when I looked out the window just moments before I started writing this, it was standing there. The thing that haunted my life. The demon of despair. The creature that had made my childhood a living hell. It knows I'm here. I can only imagine it wants revenge. This might be the end for me. God help me. I've been smoking ever since I was 18 years old, and I only did it to look cool and fit in. Smoking has this strange social hierarchy towards it, and we see it all over the movies and media that all the cool and intelligent people do it. I guess smoking is the greatest icebreaker for human beings to talk and socialize, and it kind of brings people together. Anyone who smokes will find some comfort finding another person that smokes as well. Now in my mid-30s, I am already feeling the effects of smoking, and I work in a stressful office job type of environment. I have to sell insurance and my company is really strict on hitting the targets, and I have a family now to feed. Smoking has this amazing gift to calm or de-stress the body, and especially after eating a heavy meal, smoking is the best dessert. Yes, I have noticed many changes over the years with the banning of smoking inside public areas, workspaces, and hiking up the prices of cigarette packets. Society has made a few changes to the laws to make it uncomfortable for smokers to smoke, in a bit of hope to stop them from smoking. I have tried to stop smoking so many times and have gone to many help groups and even tried smoking e-cigarettes, but it's nothing like the real thing. I mean, in my opinion, we're all gonna die anyway, and so we should squeeze the best out of life as much as we can. I am also well aware of the countless negative smoking adverts, especially on cigarette packets. On every cigarette packet, there is a man, woman, or child suffering with some kind of illness or disease caused by smoking, and with a disgusting image of the disease or illness to put off smokers from smoking. It's a strange thing, cigarette advertisements, and what I mean by that is, every other product in the world has some positive message about its products, but smoking is so powerful that not even negative advertisements can really hold smokers off. The packets are now made to look unattractive, dull, and boring. I never really cared for the way cigarettes were advertised, and so many people have told me to stop, but I just cannot. About 3 months ago I bought a cigarette packet, and I never really cared for the gruesome images on cigarette packets. But when I looked at the image of what was actually on the cigarette packet I had bought, what I saw terrified me. It was a picture of me, but I was dead, and in a coffin with my wife and 2 daughters crying for me. I actually choked up a little bit, and I was staring at it for hours on end. And it was actually a picture of me dead in a coffin, with my family crying around me. I took out all the cigarettes and threw away the packet, and I had never felt such terror in my life. It was at that moment that I had become so scared of smoking for the first time in my life. When I went into a shop for another pack of cigarettes, I checked out all of the images first on all the cigarette packets, but was relieved to find that none were images of me or my family. When I got home late though, and felt like smoking in the garden, I looked at the cigarette packet again. I was just disturbingly confused to find that the image on the cigarette packet was now showing me, but sick with blood cancer, and my family looking depressed. I swear this image wasn't on the cigarette packet before when I had checked it out in the shop. There was writing on the cigarette packet as well, which read, "Stop smoking now, Larry," and after reading that I threw away the whole cigarette packet. I checked up on my 2 daughters and watched them sleep, and I couldn't get the images of what I saw in that cigarette packet from out of my head because my family were so miserable, depressed, and with me dying it was gut-wrenching. I actually wanted to stop now, and believe me, I tried so many times, and I went back on e-cigarettes and help groups, and I was giving my all this time. Although the temptation was everywhere, and even though cigarette packets weren't so colorful or eye-catching, any cigarette packet was literally glowing at me. Then, as the temptation grew within me, and yes, I felt so ashamed of breaking my fast against smoking, I bought another cigarette packet. Because I had smoked for so long, my body was struggling to cope without cigarettes, and I couldn't even concentrate and work. I was extremely irritant and easily agitated. I needed some release, and I tried exercising, but that was useless. I needed a nice, warm smoke. I remember desperately buying a cigarette packet and feeling so much shame at the same time that it took a lot of strength to ignore it. As I smoked my first cigarette in weeks, I felt so calm and collected, and everything was so calmly silent. Life felt good in that moment, and I was so relieved to feel some smoke in my lungs. Then I started to hear crying, and I looked around to see where it was coming from, but I couldn't find anyone around me that was crying outside. Then the crying got louder, and it was multiple people crying, but I couldn't find who on earth was crying in such a way that it was heart-wrenching. I then realized where the crying was coming from, and I could feel the vibration in my hand, the hand that was carrying the cigarette packet. The image on the cigarette packet was actually moving, and not just moving, but actually alive. It was me again, but suffering from heart disease. My family were crying for me, devastated at my current predicament, and then even the sickly image of me was moving and spoke out to me saying, "Stop smoking." I tried so hard to stop but failed miserably so many times, and not even the care for my family could help me stop. I was addicted. Then I came to a point where I kind of accepted what could happen to me, and as long as it was just me and no one else, I could die happy. Life, though, is so cruel because when I was back on smoking heavily again, I did not care or flinch anymore at the deathly and sickly advert images of me on any cigarette packets I buy. Then one day, and just when I had thought nothing could surprise me, on one of my cigarette packets, the advertising image on the cigarette showed me something completely different this time. It showed me being alive and healthy. Although for my family, they were now dying of some sickness and illness due to smoking, and they were breathing in my cigarette smoke. I felt so sick, and I threw away all of my cigarette packets which showed my own family suffering now from my smoking. Then in that moment, as I was in the bathroom at my work, my wife phoned me, and she was extremely worried and frantic for our eldest daughter. She was in the ambulance van with my eldest daughter and with my second daughter. my eldest daughter Ellen started viciously coughing up blood. I drove like a maniac towards the hospital, and when I made it to the hospital, I found myself staring at my family in my eldest daughter's hospital bed. There was still one cigarette packet left in my pocket. When I took it out, it had an image on the cigarette packet, and the image showed me something more closer to home. It showed my eldest daughter in a hospital bed, with my wife and second daughter around her. And it also showed me looking at a cigarette packet.